advocacy for nearly 20 years. So in case you're not familiar with Cerame-Unie, we're going to hear more from them later, but they're the trade association in Europe representing the ceramic industry. So today we're talking about ceramics and the circular economy, specifically opportunities of the circular economy for the ceramic industry under the Green Deal. It's obviously very topical, so I look forward to hearing what our speakers have to say. I just want to share a few quick housekeeping points. This session will be recorded and shared online later. So of course we hope that the internet will be kind, and if you have any technical issues, just try to join again, and if we have any, we hope that you'll forgive us. Our speakers will come on one at a time, so you'll just see me and the speaker on screen. The other speakers will be muted with their cameras off. We have 4 presentations followed by a Q&A. So if you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and you can also vote other people's questions up. If it's a question to one specific speaker, just include that in your message. And there is a hashtag today if you want to tweet what the speakers are saying, and it's hashtag circular ceramics. So let's get started. Our keynote speaker today is MEP Maria da Graça Carvalho. She has been around EU politics for many years, including as an advisor to Commissioner Moedas and to President Barroso. She's also a full professor at the University of Lisbon, and she's speaking today on the role of science and technology in the decarbonisation of the ceramic sector. Maria, if you can unmute yourself, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Good morning to all, to colleagues of panels, to Kathryn, and to everyone that is following us directly and after on the internet. First, I would like to thank the organizers, Cerame-Unie, the European Ceramic Industry Association, and say that it's a pleasure to be here today with you, with so many of you that have a passion for engineers, science, and technology. I just want to tell you that I'm quite familiar with the ceramic industry because in my role of a researcher and university professor, I did many projects, national and European, with ceramic industry. I measure emissions in many kilns, so I spend many hours at a very hot environment near kilns, so I'm quite familiar with the science and the engineer part of the ceramics industry. So because of all of that, it's really a pleasure to address you briefly today. I will touch mainly 3 topics. First, the policy context that we are today. We are in a very important moment. Second, the state of art of the technology on the decarbonization of the ceramic industry and how this technological development may be funded. And finally, the barriers and the role of the policymakers to remove these barriers. So on the policy context, as I've already told, we are at a crucial moment. Actually, today the European Council is taking place where the new budget and the recovery plan is going to be discussed. And we, in the next few months, we will discuss not only the MFF and the budget, but all the sectorial programs that are including, and we will accompanying us in the next 7 years. We, European Commission, have already made clear, and the Parliament has supported, that the main priorities of all the funds, all the policies for the next few years are the decarbonization or the fossilization of the European economy and society, the digital transformation of the economy and all the administration also, and a more resilient economy, namely a more resilient industry, especially in what the global supply chains are concerned. And this is quite important for the sector that we are discussing today. So the Green Deal, the digital strategy, the data strategy, the industrial strategy are new pieces of policy that will in certain way guide us in the next few years, and they will be the base that gives orientation to the building of the instruments and the funding mechanisms that we are discussing and approving, and will be the main source of funds at European level for the stakeholders, namely the industry and the researchers. I'm my main committee is the ITRE committee, where I'm vice coordinator of the EPP group, and there and is a general agreement between the groups. We have called for a more coherent plans for the relaunch of our economy. We want to avoid that there are vertical policies, but that they are interlinked, and there is coherent plans between the Green Deal, the digitalization, and from the policies and the funds, because sometimes we have the policies and the funds are not so well coordinated with the policy itself. We need policies and programs that are able to overcome the big challenge that we have in front of us. We have a lot of targets, but we need to have a certain road and way to achieve these targets. Policies, instruments that induce the transformative changes that will allow us to achieve these targets. And the policy that we are focused more today, the circular economy, is one of them that will help us to achieve these targets. And this is particularly important for the ceramic sector, like other sectors, cement, steel, glass, so the energy-intensive industries, because for them it's not easy to change in a very short time. When we are talking about targets of 2030, if we take in consideration that one kiln, the lifetime of one kiln can be 30 to 40 years, we see how difficult and the huge investment that this represents. We see how difficult it is to do drastic changes in just 10 years. So this is something that policymakers need to have in their mind. But the answer for these sectors to make change and to speed up the change relies on technology. So in science, innovation, and in new clean technologies. So my second part is exactly about that, how technologies can help the sector like the ceramic sectors to do this transformative change. First, and I always say that, also in my engineer, professor of engineer role, that we need first to look at the technologies that are already available and to make the best use of this technology available, because sometimes we don't make the full use of what we have available. And for the ceramic industry, the cogeneration, combined heat and power, is something very well known, quite widely used in Portugal, Spain, and I think also Italy. At least in Portugal, we have. I have done myself, I think, audits to dozens of kilns of ceramics and other sectors. I think that were about 67 kilns that we have done measures on combined heat and power installations. So it's quite a spread and well-known, and it can be quite efficient. Also the process optimization, the design of the kiln, computer-assisted design, so simulation, CFD simulation of the kiln, and optimize the kiln. Not only the new kilns and geometries, because that is investments, but there is sometimes even transformations that are possible for existing kilns done by computer simulation. Also, very, very important, and that is an area that I have worked a lot, is the combustion optimization, also assisted by CFD, computational fluid dynamics and heat transfer and combustion, and the control and the use of expert systems and artificial intelligence that is possible. I have been more than 10 years ago already some of these applications, and really can make a big difference. So these are technologies that are available and should be better used. After, we need some of that require more development and more demonstration already exist, but they needs to special demonstration, and there it starts to be quite expensive when we start with the demonstration. That is, for example, the use of alternative fuels. There we need more work from biomass, syngas. So is an area that we need to have more demonstration and deep knowledge. And the last category, I would put the breakthrough technologies, and I will divide in mainly two: the ones on the sequestration itself, that's still a lot of uncertainties, both in CCS, carbon capture and storage, and in CCU, the carbon even more, for me, more promising, but still more uncertainties, the carbon capture and utilization. And the last group of technologies, of breakthrough technology, that we need more research, more pilot, we're still in the level of research and pilot, is new process technologies. For example, new ways of melting. I'm thinking, for example, here, microwave technology. You know that there are several projects. Actually, my department in the university, my old department in the university, is very involved in several large projects financed by the European Commission on the using of microwave in the ceramic industry, involving the Portuguese, Spanish, and Italian and Germans industry that looks very promising, but is still a very small scale that needs to be scaled up. So how all this needs to be financed? We have Horizon 2020 has financed a lot of them, but we hope that Horizon Europe will be well funded and able to continue to finance these programs. We hope that SPIRE will continue and will be well funded, because it's very important for these sectors in the industry. Also, we have some other PPPs that are relevant to the ceramic industry. We also have EIT, and the rapporteur of the strategic agenda. I would mention the EIT KIC on advanced manufacturing, but also the KICO energy should be an important partnership that the ceramic industry should look for. But we cannot stay only on Horizon and the EIT. We need to look at other funds, because the amount of budget that is required for the ceramic industry to give this step forward is very high. So we should look for the regional funds, especially for the demonstration part of the work, for the innovation fund, that is the fund from the ETS that is managed by DG Clima, the investment facilities, All the funds that will be managed by the member states contained in the recovery plan. So we really need to look for the different opportunities because the need of budget is very high. My last point is barriers and the role of policymakers. So one of them is to design good programs for funding research and technology, but there is more. There is all the policymakers should create a supportive regulatory framework to keep manufacturing competitive in Europe. It's important for our industry and in general, and ceramics in particular, to have a predictable and stable framework across climate and energy policies that applies to the whole life cycle. And there I have been pushing this a lot for many sectors, and I think for the ceramics is very important to have a life cycle view of the emissions, that you don't look at only the factory, you look from the start of the raw materials until the end of the application. So this holistic approach is the right one for example, when you are analyzing the climate change, and would be very favorable for the ceramic industry. Also related with the circular economy, this is important that this holistic approach is applied in the regulatory framework. Majority of the ceramics can be recycled and reused within the ceramic industry, but also by other industries. So all that should be taken account on this analysis of the life cycle, analysis that should be done. The last point on the policy framework is related with the strategic autonomy and the globalization. In my opinion, Europe should continue open because there is a lot of added value in the openness in terms of economy, but we should be very careful and take actions against all unfair trade practices, including the infringements of intellectual property rights, dumping, unfair trade. We should have a line that reciprocity and take in consideration the import, not to import or to have some negative effects on the importance when we import from countries that do not follow the same rules, environmental and social rules than Europe. So keeping open, but taking into consideration all these unfair practice when we do the trade with outside countries. So to conclude, there is a lot to be done. There is a lot of opportunities, but we need to make sure that policymakers are aware of the limitations, the barriers, and the problems that some of the industrial sectors have to face, that they cannot change from one day to the other, and the important role of research and technology plays in this transformation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Maria. It's such a pleasure to have somebody from the Parliament who really understands the issues that we're talking about. So thank you so much. I'd like to welcome our next speaker. And while we switch speakers, we have a poll for the audience, I believe. But let me already introduce our next speaker to put your camera on and come and join us. It's Paola Migliorini from the European Commission. She's Deputy Head of Unit in the Sustainable Production, Products and Consumption Unit of DG Environment. And while Paola comes to the stage, as it were, I'd like to direct your attention to the poll. What would improve circular practices in the ceramics industry the most? Research and innovation, regulatory framework, economic framework, financial incentives, etc. So please cast your vote in the poll. We really want to know what the audience feels about these questions. Maria, I can invite you to switch off your camera now, thank you, and Paola to switch on your camera, thank you so much. So you have a couple of minutes just to think about the question while Paola comes with her camera to join us. Okay, do we have Paola to join us now? I hope that everyone has had a chance to vote. There you are, super. And you can unmute yourself, Paola, and you can come and launch your presentation.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Let's close the poll and Paola can launch her presentation.
Okay, perfect. So you confirm that you hear me and then
I
that you
hear
see.
you, and I see some slides. Let's put them onto presentation mode and then you're ready to
there.
go. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Okay, I see.
We have our results. Just 1 second.
Voila.
Oh, no, and they've gone. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to, voila. So thank you very much. I am delighted to be here and present the, wait a second, the Circular Economy Action Plan that was adopted in March this year earlier. And I just would like to say a few words to frame the context in which this action plan came about. You will see I've asked the organizers to share with you a much longer presentation. I will only present a few slides, but it's important that you really have the overview, because the point was precisely to set the context and to improve the implementation, ensure that, like we did for the previous action plan, that all the stakeholders are on board and then contribute to this implementations, which would lead to this transition to a circular economy. So we have evidence that over the past decades, the consumption of materials and the extractions has been tripled since 1970 to nowadays. And this has had consequences on, for example, biodiversity loss and water stress. We consider that at least 90% of biodiversity loss and water stress is due to activity of extractions and consumptions. So it is clear that while on one side we have stepped up efforts to recycle and reuse some of the materials, we are still at only 12% of the materials needs that comes from recycled materials. So in this context of using more and not fulfilling the needs with what we reuse, we need to do more. We need to go to a next step of circularity, where we keep the materials and their value in the economic systems. We look at the way we consume, and then the way we produce and the way we consume. So in the context of this larger policy change, we have adopted with the new Commission the European Green Deal. This was in December. The European Green Deal is a strategy that sets the frame for sustainable growth. Then we have the pandemic, and what happens? Something that we have been calling for, a change in the way we produce and consume, suddenly becomes a must. We are forced, we have been put into a situation where we have changed the way we were producing, consuming, and living. So now I like to say we have no more excuses. We see that it works. We saw that we can reduce the impact of our actions on our environment. So even more so, we believe that we needed to put together with the recovery plan all efforts for greater circularity. So I want to give you some details of the action plan. It has 35 actions that covers the entire life cycle of products. There are some major themes. So as for those of you who knows the first action plan, we have the phases of the circular economy. Yeah? So extractions, production, consumption, waste, and then putting back the materials in the loop. So in these 35 actions, we have a series of actions that will really focus on making products sustainable. And then that all the products becoming sustainable, that they are the norm, that we are not forced anymore just to choose, but that everything that is available is sustainable. It's a long way to there. So for this, we need to start also empowering consumers and activate the power of the public administration as a public buyer to increase the demand for these sustainable products. We also have actions that focus on some key product value chains, some that have the greatest impact, or some where the impact can be more immediate. We have foreseen actions for electronics and ICT, batteries. As a matter of fact, it's one of the first actions that we will deliver, will be during the fall. It's new legislations concerning the batteries. Packaging, plastics, remember the plastic strategy. So we were following up on the remaining actions, notably on microplastics, for example, just to mention a few, or bio-based materials. We are addressing textiles, constructions and buildings, and I will give a little bit more details on this that I believe it's of closest interest to your sector. Measures for food, water and nutrients. As I said, we need to change the way we produce and consume, also to prevent the generation of waste. So a greater focus not only on waste management, once we have the waste, we need to deal with it, but on preventing the generation of waste. And then, as I was saying in the beginning, the circular economy is a joint file and a joint effort of different stakeholders. So we have also put in place some measures to support citizens, as not only as consumers, but precisely as citizens, regions, and cities. Overall, big support also for research and innovation. Don't forget, of course, as it was said in the presentation before, that when we need to change the way we do things, we need to innovate. So the thinking of new technologies and developing them, demonstrating them, and see how they really work is key in this effort. And different with the previous action plan is that we have set up a series of actions also to lead globally in line with the SDGs, but also taking up a leadership role, notably, for example, on plastics or on other areas, to drive these transitions with the international partners. As I said, I wanted to give you a little bit more details on the actions that we have set up for making products the norm. It's a combination of 3 areas of work. We are going to focus on the product design, on empowering consumers, and on the production processes, leading them to greater circularity. It is true that many products still break down too quickly. We need to address planned obsolescence. Some products cannot be easily reused, or they are too costly to repair because they are not assembled in a way that it is easy to disassemble. They cannot be easily recycled. And some of them are still made for single use. I let you imagine the tensions, if I can say, of priority during the lockdown for the single-use items that we needed to address, safety and health considerations with environmental impact. And here, again, I want to stress the importance and the concepts that were at the basis of the plastic strategy and the single-use plastic directive. We need to address the way people behave, the way we use the product. No fight against one specific material, but trying to educate and to make easy the reuse and the collection of the material that are those that needs to be originally made for single use. Then we address consumers. What is the issues? The consumers are loaded with labels and green claims, and some of them are misleading. So we need to address also those. So in order to give all the tool to consumers to drive for their role the transition. We are also looking at production processes. and then see, not only with the circular economy action plan, but with a series of initiatives that you will see, we need to address a reduction of pollution of air, water, and soil. For example, you've heard of the zero ambition pollution strategy that is coming up. So these are the guidelines, if you want, of our activity on this larger initiative on having a sustainable product policy framework. So 3 angles. In details, what is this first angle of ensuring that the design of the products results in having sustainable products? We are putting forward, we are working to a legislative initiative that would set principles for requirements on products that are placed on the market. If you think 80% of the impact of a product is determined at the design phase. I was indicating the material that are used, and then the design, the disassembly facility of products in some cases. So all these need some new requirements. We are adopting this proposal. For the moment, it's planned for 2021, end of 2021. And the main, the core of the work will be an extension of the scope of the Eco-Design Directive and looking at beyond energy-related products. So we are working with the colleagues in DG GROW and in DG NR that are responsible for the Eco-Design Directive for the energy-related products, and see how we can, what are the best options to make this puzzle work. Puzzle, because I'm saying there are several legislative measures that comes into place. Eco-Design Directive, and then other specifications that exist currently in the packaging legislations, or as I said, in the batteries, in textiles, in constructions. So try to understand how we are not going to confuse, but we are going to simplify the life of businesses that needs to, in the end, produce these sustainable products. What are we going to work on with this new legislative initiatives? We are going to improve durability, reusability, upgradability, and repairability requirements. For those of you who have followed closely the work under the first action plan, you will know that we have already put forward these criteria, some of these aspects for products like this dishwasher or washing machine. So we are going to extend this to other products. We are going to address the presence of hazardous chemicals and look to increase the percentage of recycled content. As I was saying, restricting the single use and then address premature obsolescence. We are going to find ways to have more circular business models. So incentivizing models where the product becomes a service. So not anymore ownership of a product, but capacity that the ownership would remain in the producers, and then us as consumers would benefit from a service. And then we are working already to develop an idea that has been going on for now several years, the idea of a digital product passport. So having information related to materials and instructions on the material, on the product, making it available through digital means throughout the entire value chain for the producers and the different steps, but also for the consumers. The other, and I see that I need to keep to bear in mind the time that I'm allocated. The other aspects that I wanted to focus on is this empowering consumers. So there are a series of initiatives that will establish de facto right to repair or strengthen the right to repair of consumers, review of the consumer law in order to ensure that the information on products is given at the point of sale, and legislative proposal that we call it the green claims. So it's using the product and organizational environmental footprint methods that we have been piloting over the past 5-6 years. Using those to ensure that companies that are claiming that their products are green do effect measures with harmonized methods, the impacts being on soil, on climate, on water use. So a series of 16 categories of impacts that are measured, so then products can actually bear the label of being green or not. We are introducing more systematically also the criteria that I was mentioning on eco-label criteria, so on durability, recyclability, and recycled content, and big push on mandatory green public procurement. You will know that green public procurement is now voluntary, but we are looking at ways to make it mandatory in some sectoral legislations. And the other points, and I will close, so a few words on circularity in production processes, working on the revision of the Industrial Emission Directive, support to industrial symbiosis centers, support to SMEs with an SME strategy, environmental technology verification, again, reinforcement of the scheme as a new certification mark in support of innovative technologies. But what I really wanted to say and focus of interest for your own sector, and then with this I will conclude, is measures for the product value chains of construction and buildings. You will see when you go through the presentations that you have details of each of the product value chains and the measures that are foreseen. Allow me to arrive here. The strategy for a sustainable built environment. To support the sector, we are foreseeing a series of actions to which I needed to anticipate another one that has come up with the recovery package and the supports for businesses after the COVID crisis, which is the renovation wave. It's a document that is coming up in the fall. Initial ideas were to have a strategy for a sustainable built environment, and then the renovation wave immediately before. What we are looking at now is striking the balance of which measures that we were foreseeing for the strategy can actually be anticipated to the renovation wave in order to make it really usable for support for the sector. But you can expect consultations on these measures coming up. And then again, a balance between a renovation wave, big focus on the existing buildings, and then a few months or several months after, within a year, a sustainable built environment that will look at the broader aspects, not just only the existing, but also anticipating how we build. So we will revise the construction product regulation. We will include some recycled content considerations, and at the same time looking at the life cycle and not only at the use phase of a building. We are considering a revision of the material recovery targets set in the EU legislations, and using of a tool, Levels, which is a tool to assess the life cycle impact of a building. We are looking to use this in public procurement and in the framework of sustainable finance, so to give signals of what are buildings that are considered sustainable, what they are and what they foresee. I would conclude here, knowing that again there are many other details. I'll be happy to address them at the end in the QA session, but at also the same time as a follow-up to this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paola. I get a lot of hope when I hear your presentation. You're obviously trying to address this from so many different angles, but whenever I hear someone saying citizens instead of consumers, that already gives me some hope. So thank you. Let's stop with sharing your screen. And then I would like to see, if possible, the poll question, the results from the poll before. Here we go. So Paola, while you switch your camera and your mic off, and our next speaker, Gerhard, comes to the stage, I'd like to just have a quick look at these poll results. So research and innovation, that's very much in line with what MEP Carvalho was saying. 53% of people think that research and innovation is the most important aspect. Financial incentives and regulatory framework, yeah, pretty much a quarter each on those. Great, thank you. Let's have our next poll. We do want to get as much audience participation as we can. There's no coffee break and there's no networking, so this is it. The next poll is about the obstacles to more circular practices in the ceramic industry. So take a minute just to cast your vote here while we get Gerhard Koch introduced. Gerhard is the head of public affairs at Wienerberger, and he's been involved with Cerame-Unie's work for many years. So he's our industry representative today, and he's going to be talking about the ceramic industry's contribution to the circular economy. But let's just give people a chance to vote while you get your screen onto presentation mode, Gerhard, and then we'll be ready to go. I can't see people voting on my side, so I trust that you're voting. All right, perhaps we could close the poll now and move to Gerhard's presentation. Welcome, Gerhard. The floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you can all hear me well. Kathryn, does it work? Yeah.
Yeah, it's perfect. Go ahead.
You can also see my presentation.
And you, it's all good.
Perfect. I'm pleased to have been invited by Cerame-Unie to speak about circular economy in our industry, ceramic industry. I work since 34 years now in this industry, and circularity, recycling has always been an issue. So I want to give you first a brief overview of what we are speaking about, of what industry we are speaking about. The ceramic industry is composed mainly of SMEs, so we have 80% roughly of SMEs. We employ around about 200,000 people in Europe. We are an industry producing very long-lasting, durable products. Just to give you one example, a brick house lasts normally far more than 150 years. We are not one of the biggest sectors. Nevertheless, we have a production value of around about 31 billion euros. And very good for Europe, we have a positive trade balance. We export 4.6 billion products, value more than we import. And in the right part of the chart, you see which sectors are represented in Cerame-Unie. By far the biggest one is wall and floor tiles, then comes bricks, roof tiles and papers, refractories, and other subsectors which you can see here. A few advantages. Of course, we have many more, but just a few to mention in the context of circularity and resource efficiency. Clay, our raw material which we use, is widely available. And
can I interject just a second? Could you try to turn your video off? I'm having a little bit of interference with your sound and we want to hear you as best as we can. So let's just try that without the video, please.
I try.
Stop video. Yeah, we're just getting a little bit of interference on the line and it's a shame.
Honestly, I have to get out of the presentation mode then because otherwise I have no access to the...
That's true. But you actually sound okay now. So maybe let's just keep going and see how we go. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
So I turned the video off, yes?
Yeah, try to turn the video off and let's just see if it's better. And go back to your presentation. Sorry for the interruption.
So I try again. There were
go to presentation. Perfect.
A lot of advantages of ceramics, but just to mention a few. Clay is widely available and nearly endlessly available. And even more important, it's easy accessible because it's close to the surface. And regarding the clay pits, they play quite an important and positive role when we talk about preservation of biodiversity. All our clays are restored after use and become secondary life areas for sometimes threatened animals. And also very important, we are local producers. We have local markets. We are local employees, so we produce local markets. I already mentioned the issue of longevity, durability, and that is also important in the context of resource efficiency. I said already, a brick house has an average lifespan more than 150 years, and remember, historic buildings in Europe, you will find some 2,000 years old, in fact. Another example, ceramic floor tiles. They have a lifespan of around about 50 years. Clay pipes, they have an average lifespan of more than 150 years. Or expanded clay, also a product covered by Cerame-Unie, has a nearly never So this durability plays a very important role when we talk about circularity and resource efficiency. What is important from our perspective, being a big business, Wienerberger is by far the biggest producer of clay bricks, blocks, and roof tiles in the world. For us, this circularity and this circular economy requires innovative business models. Of course, the products we produce, ceramic products, they can be reused or recycled after the end of our life cycle. However, we have to confess, when producing our products by firing, we change the chemistry, and it is not so we put them back. So from a fired brick, you will never be able to get back a raw clay. Therefore, 100% closed loop recycling will not be possible. However, we have many other options, and a few I wanted to show. We have developed a lot of solutions in the ceramic industry to minimize the raw material consumption, to reduce waste in our production processes, and to increase the reuse and recycling of ceramic products. And just a few examples. First of all, that's clear, we recycle the internal production residue scrap. And by that, we substitute to a certain extent fresh raw materials. But we also recycle and use waste from other industrial processes. This picture is just to give you a feeling what sort of processes we talk about. Here you see sawdust, and this is widely used in the clay block industry to improve the thermal efficiency of our clay blocks. Water. We have nearly no wastewater in our processes. 100% of the water is reused in the manufacturing process. We optimize our materials for production to reduce the necessary amount of raw material. We cooperate in the whole supply chains to reuse used old products. Here on these little pictures, you can see a company collecting old roof tiles, cleaning them, and then they can be reused for a new project. Or on the right-hand side, you see facing bricks. And last but not least to mention, where we are investing a lot in research and development, is the optimization of our product designs. For example, in case of roof tiles, and we will come back to that example in a minute. What I want to make clear is that it is not that easy at the moment. We are confronted with a lot of regulatory obstacles, and lifting these barriers will really be key for full uptake of circular practices in our industry. And just to mention a few, we have still not a well-functioning market for secondary raw materials. We have a lot of national approaches in this area. National process of collection and treatment of waste, but also national legislation limiting the use of recycled materials. And also very important from my viewpoint is the lack of design for deconstruction. So there is also a lot to be done in the construction industry, in the building industry, to design for deconstruction. Speaking of Wienerberger, allow me please to give you a few insights in our strategy in the company. We have a well-developed sustainability strategy, and this strategy rests on 3 pillars. First, decarbonization of our product portfolio. So we have the goal to fully commit to the 2050 net zero carbon goal of the European Commission. Secondly, we want to encourage and further develop circular economy in our business. And last but not least, we want to preserve biodiversity and further contribute to that goal. What does it mean concretely when we talk about the circular economy issue? Mainly 3 things. the recyclability of our product. So when we design a new product, we have to consider, is it recyclable? Then the use of secondary raw materials in our production. I just mentioned before the example of sawdust in the production of clay blocks. And even more important, the reuse of our products. I said ceramic products have a very long lifetime and can maybe be used for several projects, not just for one. I want to give you two concrete examples from our company. First one, roof tiles. I already mentioned it. We have applied the finite element method to optimize the shape, the cross-section of our clay roof tiles. This has led to significant less material needed for the products. At the same time, the new shape provides better mechanical performance. And of course, it's clear this leads to a significantly improved resource efficiency, better technical performance, less material. And if we have to file less material, we also need less fuel and have less CO2 emissions. And the next example, Wienerberger also produces clay pipes in our business transfer caramel. There we already have a recycled content of, in average, 40%, up to 60% in some cases. Those clay pipes have a very long lifespan, 100 or even 150 years. They do not only use the internal scrap in production, but we also use external recycling materials such as broken wall floor tiles or natural stone powder.
Can I encourage you, Gerhard, to come to the conclusion of your presentation?
I am.
Oh,
I am.
Thank you.
No worry.
Here we are. Here we have it.
That's already my conclusion. I would say we can already see the summit, but together, policymakers, industry, research, science, we still have some steps ahead of us. And that's my conclusion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gerhard. And apologies to the audience. We had a few sound issues on Gerhard's transition there in places. Let's see the results of the second poll, if we could. Gerhard, you can stop sharing your screen and you can mute yourself. Thank you so much. And here are the results for you from the last poll. We're also getting a good number of questions into the Q&A. You still have time to do that. And don't forget the hashtag circular ceramics if you are using Twitter or LinkedIn or other social media. So what do our results tell us? The biggest obstacle is the lack of harmonized waste legislative practices across the member states. Yeah, that's a clear winner. We have another poll, the final poll. If I can ask the Cerame-Unie to launch the final poll while we welcome our next speaker. Here we have it. Which solutions should the ceramic industry develop further for more sustainable products and a more circular economy? If you take a moment to vote on that one, I'll introduce our next speaker. Our next presenter is Sílvia Machado. She's Senior Advisor for Environment and Climate for CIP, which is the Business Confederation of Portugal. And she's worked for many years in the ceramic industry, but now she speaks on behalf of the whole of the Portuguese industry. We are running a little bit over time, so I would like to invite you to start, Sílvia, and we can probably close that poll. Over to you, Sílvia. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Good morning, and thank you for the invitation. It is a pleasure to participate in this webinar, to have the chance to hear the previous panelists and to share my thoughts with all of you, especially because of what you said. We are hosted by ceramic sector, where I worked for for what feels like all my professional life almost. I'm now working with several areas of the Portuguese economy, industrial sectors, waste management, services, and also trade sectors. And I think what I'm talking about today, some of the challenges that we face to implement more circular measures are related with many sectors. I will try to be brief to allow you to participate and to ask the questions I'm sure you all want to ask after the previous interesting interventions. So in terms of challenges related with the implementation of this new circular economy plan, which means the continuity and the step up from the previous one, I would say the first one is to guarantee, even if partially, the investments planned in this area, private as well as public. At this stage, we try to recover from the crisis caused by COVID-19 pandemic. There is a high risk of having to suspend or redirect the investments planned to boost circular economy or to implement decarbonization measures. Most companies are now making efforts to recover financially and in some cases just struggling to maintain liquidity to meet wage compromises and costs with health protection measures for the workers, for example. On the other hand, in an economic crisis brought about a public health crisis, people understandably concentrate their immediate concerns on health and basic resources. The long-term danger of climate change may, in some countries, be overlooked, and the transition of behavior and consumer habits essential to increase the circularity of the economy may slow down or even fall back. Previous planned measures to shift taxation from labor to other tax systems that are less harmful to economic growth, such as consumption taxes and environmental taxes, may be suspended so as not to aggravate the inevitable social crisis we face and will continue to face for a significant period of time. Another major challenge will be to achieve a fair system of requirements related with circularity. New rules call upon establishing reward systems for manufacturers based on their sustainability performance. This means, firstly, to establish a relationship between the performance levels of companies in the granting of incentives and finance. This is the complicated ongoing discussions on sustainable finance. Secondly, to relate environmental taxes and fees to the level of eco-design of products. I mean the eco-modeling of financial contributions within extended producer responsibility systems. In both areas, the requirements that can be implemented may not be easy to quantify, nor be objective and clear enough. Take, for example, one of the eco-design criteria already mentioned today, the ability to be recycled. That depends not only on the intrinsic characteristics of the product, but also on the recovery, treatment, and recycling infrastructures available in that region. The third challenge I identify is not new, but it's still a problem, and Gerhard already mentioned it. It's the difficulty of adapting supply and demand for secondary raw materials. That is creating a true market for byproducts or waste, which are secondary resources. In practice, these materials compete in the market with virgin materials, which means that these virgin materials, which meet all product specifications, often at a lower price. This can make it difficult to recover investments in recycling. In addition, for the suppliers of the secondary raw materials, it can be difficult to guarantee that the quantities and the qualities needed are accomplished. And even if you can guarantee quality, for example, by means of a specific harmonized standard or a technical specification, secondary raw materials are usually seen as having lower quality. This can lead them being used only in products with lower specifications or in low value processes. We have in place in Portugal a national decision about the conditions to allow ceramic waste to be classified as a byproduct and used as a secondary raw material to be incorporated in other ceramic processes or other processes, mainly construction products and construction sector. And this is one of the most natural resources consuming sectors, so it's important. Having this decision published, as you know, it means that being no longer a waste, it does not require the transporters to be licensed to do so, and it can be used in those applications considered in the decision without a special permit, which is a bureaucratic and costly process. This means in principle, more users, and finally more market. When talking to a manufacturer that produces recycled aggregates using ceramic waste, he says that even him can only be sure of a reduced market for those products, thanks to the fact that they have construction companies in the same group. Because usually constructors opt for virgin materials, if not because of the price, because of the lack of confidence, theirs or their clients' confidence in those materials, even though the product that they do is certified according to the European standard. Another turn down in the process of getting that kind of decisions to be approved and to get the market going on is the reluctance of certain sectors that already use to incorporate our waste, as cement, for example, at a zero cost. They were not in favor because creating a market can mean that the possibility that those materials could get added value and not so good perspective for some of them that already went through the costly process of getting the permit to use those materials as a waste. Economic incentives, such as application of reduced VAT rates, can help to solve the situation, as well as innovation in terms of technical specifications and quality standards as well. Imposing minimum thresholds for secondary raw materials incorporation in new products may be also a positive incentive. But then again, the definition of those thresholds is not easy to set, nor to control. We have, for example, an obligation to incorporate at least 5% of secondary raw materials in public construction projects, but there is no data that is being done. So what is the real impact of that measure? We don't know. Finally, still on this point about secondary raw materials and referring especially to the process of getting a decision on a byproduct classification, the criteria set to be able to obtain it can be very restrictive. It is important to have control, of course, and prevent abusive use of this possibility, but if the first condition imposed by a certain for a certain material to be regarded as not being waste, but as being a byproduct, is that further use of the substance or object is certain, this can make the process of getting your application to be approved very tricky. If it was a waste until that moment, probably some of the possible uses are not even being explored yet. So in the end, you are making it necessary to prove that there is a market before you are able to create one. And so, well, there's much to do, many obstacles to tackle and difficulties to overcome. But that being said, still, I believe that there are many solutions to explore and a lot of possibilities. That's what I feel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sílvia. It certainly sounds like there are a lot of possibilities, but also some legislative changes that are needed. And what I hear throughout all of the speakers is there's really a need for public information. Because as you've said, you know, a construction company might not want to use what's seen as waste materials, that their customers just might not be confident to buy a house that's been built with partly recycled materials. Yeah. So there's a big job to do across Europe in educating people, indeed. Oh, well, thank you so much. Let's have all of our speakers putting their cameras on and keeping their microphones off for now. We have the results of the last poll, I think. Cerame-Unie can show us the results. Here we go. So this was about the solution, which was the main solution that should be developed. And the winner is reuse of waste from processes in other industries. All right, so we have a good idea of what the audience thinks. We've also received a fair amount of questions. Let me check that we have, yeah, we have our speakers. We're joined also by Renaud Batier at this point. He's the Director General of Cerame-Unie. And Paola, if you're still with us, you could put your camera on now, and then we'll be able to see all of our panelists. So we've had a lot of, there we go, fantastic. Do we have everyone? Yes, I think so. We've had a lot of questions from the audience. Let me invite you to unmute yourselves whenever you want to comment. We have one question from the audience. I have some of my own, but given the time, I think we should already take some audience questions. We have one person who says that there are very clear targets. I think this is talking about the Green Deal and the Circular Economy Action Plan, you know, the Green Deal, digitalization and so on. But it's quite a challenging question. The audience member is asking if the EU can overcome bureaucracy to make this happen. Now we have the Commission and the Parliament represented here, and the rest of us have a lot of experience of dealing with the EU institutions. And so I think it can be seen sometimes from outside that there are a lot of obstacles. So perhaps, do you have a few thoughts on that, either Maria or Paola? How are you going to make sure that it's not a bureaucratic nightmare, but that it does serve the needs of the European citizen?
Yes, I thank you for this question. In fact, I'm actually quite happy about the question, because I like to answer also with some concrete examples, and then I always think that the facts speaks better than just the words. So if you think of how, in a moment of necessity, I can give you two very practical examples where we already cut on the bureaucracy and then we're able to provide a timely response. It was just last year with the Single-Use Plastic Directive, with only because of a joint efforts of member states and the Parliament and the different institutions, we were able to provide a response and to keep the commitment to address the marine pollution with the Single-Use Plastic Directive that normally would have taken much longer, but keeping safe the results and all the consultation and all the knowledge gathering needs to support a legislative initiatives, we were really able within a year to come up with a legislative proposal that was very comprehensive. So in that case, yes, we were able to cut on the bureaucracy. And now, same example with the pandemic, the Commission has been able, in situations of a change of working methods that we have all gone through, but I invite you to assess the difficulty to continue. 30,000 functionaries went, just for the commissions, went telework from one day to the other. This is an impressive pilot of changing the way, and then still deliver on, and then focus the resources that were critical to deliver for the general goods, meaning having a recovery package, continuing the implementation of some of the measures that I said. We have delivered also the commitments of the different strategies that were on preparation. So I think, yes, we can overcome, and we have shown that we can. Of course, it's joint efforts. So I want to take this opportunity to express my thanks also to, again, the Parliament members, and then to member states, and also to all the stakeholders. Look at also sectors and then actors like Cerame-Unie, how you manage to set up another way of reaching out to people and more stakeholders than you would have been able otherwise. So not only I think we can cut bureaucracy, we can actually do also a better job.
That's a great answer. Thank you, Paola. Do you have anything to add, please?
Yes, thank you very much. It's a question that I always like to address. The bureaucracy, together with the fragmentation of the funds, are probably the biggest barrier to innovation in Europe. When we say why we are losing competitiveness towards the US and China and other countries outside Europe, I think these are the main reasons. And it's not only the Commission or the Parliament or the member states, is everything together, because it's not only the Commission. Sometimes the programs in the Commission are even simpler than the member states. Is everything together. We have a tradition of a very complex administration. Is the bureaucracy of the member states, the bureaucracy of the institutions that run the regional funds, is the European bureaucracy, and sometimes they are not even compatible to each other. And we make an effort, all of us. I know the three institutions have been in the council with my role of minister. I worked 10 years in the Commission, and I'm also a member of the European Parliament. And we made an effort, but it's kind of the culture and Also, is like I usually compare the bureaucracy to entropy. It always grows. If we don't withdraw some energy of the system, the bureaucracy tend to grow by itself. We need a measure, especially now in the recovery plan, and with this exit strategy, we need a measure operation to make things simpler and compatible, the rules compatible between, for example, DG RTD and DG Regio. Sometimes the rules are different. We need to make a big effort. And the other one is the fragmentation of funds. We have the funds to finance industry or to finance COVID, all in different pots at the European level, and also with the European level with the member states, and it's difficult to decide. So, of course, we now took very good decisions on COVID, but it took us the global strategy to finance the vaccine and the therapy was only on the 4th of May. I started in Parliament asking for a solution in January. It took a long time for the Commission because you need to negotiate with the member states. You need to negotiate between to put together the different funds. The US is different because they are one country. We are 27 member states, but we need to find a way to move quicker. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think just having that awareness of the inefficiencies and that they might hamper moving quickly towards the common goal is already a first step, but hopefully we'll see some changes. I'm hearing a lot about the pandemic from the speakers, and it's quite interesting the way that it's presented, because on the one hand, it's seen as a proof, actually from Paola, a proof that things can change and that we can act and do things quickly. But then it's also brought about issues around, single use. And I don't want to go into that too much, but I just thought I'd bring it up as a theme that I've seen throughout your presentations. I have a question from the audience, because I'm seeing also a theme coming up about waste and byproducts, and the legislation is not always so supportive. I don't know, perhaps not everyone will be able to answer or speak to this because it is quite technical, but let me read out the question. It's important to clarify the condition of waste, byproducts and secondary raw material in waste law and in REACH and CLP. The legal situation of waste in the ceramic sector is going to change, or is the legal situation of waste in the ceramic sector going to change to speed up the circular economy? It seems like it's definitely a barrier that's been mentioned by several of the speakers for making the ceramic industry more circular. Does anyone have anything that they could share with us on that point? I think Sylvia, you touched on it. Paola, yeah, if you have
sorry, considering that you're talking about waste legislation.
We couldn't hear your question. The second part I couldn't hear. It was having noises, and I couldn't hear the second part of the question.
The second part of the question
was... Is it written in the chat?
Yes, it's in the chat. It's at the top of the list at the moment. It's from Pilar Perez de Assis. And it's asking, will the legal situation of waste have to change to speed up the circular economy? I think that, Paola, you had something you wanted to already offer on this.
Yes, as I said, of course, there are some reviews of legislations that are foreseen. I saw, just to link to some of the points that Gerhard mentioned, the waste shipment legislation is being reviewed. Linked to the packaging, maybe this has a lesson implication for the ceramic industry, but construction and demolition waste. So there are reviews that are foreseen, and guidelines or implementing acts that will come forward as planned. What I think you need to keep in mind is that there is this switch of focus from the waste management to the prevention of the generation of the waste, the prevention of waste generation. So for this, we really need to work a lot with the industry, and I saw some innovative products that will address this, but I also understand, and we are all aware, that the existing buildings needs to be dealt with. And so the materials that have been put in in buildings needs to be addressed. So nothing, I wouldn't say there is anything new according to what beyond what it is planned. But for example, if you think, I saw also a lot of issues of mismatch of coding. This is something that we have been dealing with, and we will continue to deal with in this interface between chemical products and waste legislations. It is true that there is mismatching. It is true that to close the loops, you need to address these individually. And I can only say that we will address some of the issues. For example, there is a chemical strategy that is coming up in the fall as well. So some of the issues will be addressed there. I cannot ensure that all the issues that are linked to the ceramic industry will be addressed there. But I think that the constant communication and then signaling of what are the specific issues is still the best way to ensure that they will be addressed concretely.
Because it sounded like there was an issue with the secondary materials and waste legislation and chemical legislation. It sounded like there was some issues that needed to be addressed.
Yes. Well, with the last waste review, we have asked, for example, requirements to have for recyclers, for producers to make recyclers available, communicate the composition of the materials. So we were setting up a database for that. But you can imagine the complications that it takes. But once that will be set up, just like REACH, which is a database, we really believe that it will lead some results, and then we'll straighten up some of the issues that we still have.
All right, great, thank you. Anyone else to add something? Gerhard, please.
Yeah, I would just like to add that the legal obstacles are not always and not only EU legislation issues. Very often we are confronted with troubles on national level, national pieces of legislation which form obstacles for an increased rate of recycling and reuse of products. And just to give you a concrete example, in Austria, since some years, we do have a construction demolition waste regulation, and this imposes so heavy restrictions to the use of recycling materials that the effect of that piece of legislation was a reduced amount of recycling, which was, of course, exactly the opposite to what was originally the intention. So my message is the role of the EU could and should be, in my perspective, more harmonization also between existing national legislation.
Let me make I've understood the question, because we had a little bit of interference on your line, but you would like the EU to be more involved in the enforcement and the implementation of legislation in the member states. Is that right? That there's not so many discrepancies at member state level? Is that the question?
It's the other way around. Yeah, we do have national legislation here and there, and there is a lack of harmonization between these national pieces of legislation, and more harmonization would help.
And should the EU take the highest level of legislation that's out there, or the lowest?
No, it should have the role of being coordinator of national legislation.
Does anyone on the EU side have any comments on that?
Yeah, it's clear, yeah.
He agrees.
Yeah, no, confirm.
Yeah.
Yes, I would just confirm that, yes, we have national legislation, but sometimes the interpretation at national level, it makes it very complicated. I don't know. And then, of course, after having national legislations, we will need harmonization so that the circle can work on at the EU level. But I don't think we can foresee any changes in ceramic waste specifically legislation. But what we need is to improve the implementation of the existing one and to harmonize it. Yes.
This links to a question that we've had from the audience as well. Someone saying that they like the initiative of classifying waste from ceramics as byproducts, and that this kind of initiative should be extended to all the member states to speed up the transition from waste to byproducts, as that will help accelerate the circular economy. I wonder, MEP da Graça Carvalho, would you have any comment on that, about shifting the classifying of waste from a waste to a byproduct that they can then be used as a secondary raw material? Is that something that you have come across yet? And if not, anyone else that would like to comment on it?
Yes, I think as I support entire what Paula said of the European Commission, that and I think that it's important to look at the revision of the classification of wastes.
Super, thank you. There's a related question as well about additives, substitutes and secondary raw materials coming feed. So I think it's feedstocks coming from other sectors to be used in the ceramic industry, that this kind of cross-sectoral cooperation would also speed up moving to a more circular economy. If anyone has any thoughts on that specifically.
I think that this is the essence of the circular economy. I mean, trying to use the waste of one industry as a resource for another one. So
not having to have a closed loop within one sector, but having a loop within multiple sectors.
Exactly. Exactly. And this is, for example, the projects and the supports to industrial symbiosis projects and a mapping of the industrial symbiosis sites, trying to identify what are the material flows. This is something that we are developing precisely to support this cross-sector utilization of materials, because this is you know there's a limit of reuse that you can do maybe within the same sector, but the next the best opportunities lies in the next in the next step, or sometimes in a sector that we would have not necessarily thought could use or reuse some of the material. And this is where the push also for innovation is important, because again, processes that were used for traditionally or for years or for ages, that have their own value for some aspects, well, can lead the way in some cases to novelty, to new way, or using again, this is also why I'm thinking we are adopting this framework for bio-based. I wasn't mentioning in details, but bio-based products and biodegradable, and to which extent the bio-based material can be used for the benefit of the environment, and to which extent they actually would raise more issues than others. So this you can only see when you look at the impacts and the opportunities in other sectors as well. So this is the kind of exercise that we are.
So there's work to be done around harmonized standards and classification of waste. It brings me to another question from the audience, actually, saying the impact note on intermediates that the Commission is now submitting to Caracal goes directly against our efforts to reuse and eliminate some dangerous substances. How can we get the EU to adopt a more coherent approach to the huge challenges we're facing? Is that something that you know about, Paola, that you'd be able to speak to?
Okay, I don't deal directly with that. It's my colleagues in the chemicals units that manages the Caracal. So I would invite the audience member that put forward this question to either send me the question directly or contact me directly, so then I can forward it to the relevant colleagues.
Maybe, Kathryn, I can at least explain further the question.
Yeah, that would be great.
That has been raised from one of our members. Since I also have the floor, I can also speak. So it is a very practical example indeed, also linked to circular economy and linked to industrial autonomy that we are also now trying to push under the green recovery and in the COVID circumstances. So it is about something that you need, it's a gate that is under the flow of metal in the steel industry, and this gate can be produced and is produced in Europe. But it contains something which is subject to authorization, but not in the final phase. In the final product, this substance has completely disappeared. So if you produce it somewhere else in the world, it comes to Europe, and the substance called tar pitch is not in the product anymore. It has nothing to do with which. If we produce it here, then we could be subject to authorization, and in the end, we could lead to the relocation of the industry. So we could stop producing. The easiest would be to stop producing. But then you don't recycle these products anymore, because our factories are close to the steel makers everywhere in Europe. So this is a product really for the steel industry. This is in this sense that we are asking this question. I think our members asked the question in the context of circular economy.
It sounds a bit like it refers to what Maria was saying as well about these. Sometimes there are inefficiencies, sometimes different policy areas are bumping up against each other, and that these things need to be addressed. I think given the time, unless anyone has anything, burning comment that they would still like to make, we will need to conclude the Q&A. Are there any more comments that you would like to share with the audience, or shall we move on? All right, well, thank you so much to the panelists. I would like to hand over to Renaud Batier, Director General from Cerame-Unie, for some concluding remarks. Thank you so much. Renaud, I think that you are on mute.
Yes.
There you go.
Thank you, Kathryn. So yes, the number of participants and the contributions that we have seen, I think they really show that there is a huge interest in the circular economy. And I think we had at some stage 185 participants. And I know that a lot of people from universities, research, industry were connected. So there is a genuine interest. And what we have heard is that ceramic products are really already resource efficient because they can last almost forever or for thousands of years. Of course, in real life, we talk about 150 for houses and so on. So we are resource efficient, but we are perfectly aware that we need to do more in today's society. And MEP Carvalho has highlighted the importance of research and innovation. And also, it was interesting because she talked about energy as well. Next week, we have another webinar where we talk about decarbonization in the industry in relation to indirect emissions, so in relation to electricity. And we have one microwave project, which is completely about, it is delivering CO2 reduction, and at the same time, it is increasing our autonomy in terms of raw material because it allows it would allow to produce one raw material we don't produce ourselves. So there are a lot of links in between circular economy, of course, and CO2 reductions. We have heard that we have high ambitions, but they can be hindered by regulatory obstacles. And we heard a lot about waste and definition of waste, the harmonization of the legislative aspects of waste. This is something that will be very important, intensively discussed in another webinar we will organize in this series of webinars on the circular economy. It will be in October, and this one will be focused on circular economy in the refractory sector. And there we have very clear examples of one producer in country, so it can be in Germany, exporting to the Netherlands, to a steel manufacturer, getting back the refractory brick in France. And in France, we cannot recycle it because of the regional, it's not even the national legislation, it's the regional legislation that prevents us from using it because it's a waste. So that will be important for our discussion in the refractory webinar. We really welcome the circular economy. I think you have seen that from our contribution, the circular economy package. And we think also in the context of the COVID crisis, we hear a lot about industrial autonomy. And we see that there is that circular economy becomes an even higher priority in this context, and we see how we can play a role here in this context. So there will be forthcoming webinars. We are also looking forward to them. One next week more on decarbonization. In our circular economy series, there will be one on the 29th of September, which will be more focusing on construction. And there also we have heard in the presentation from the European Commission the importance of renovation, the importance of the sustainable built environment. So for us, of course, it's a challenge and an opportunity. And this is why we are organizing the webinar. And finally, I would really like to thank our audience, even higher than what we expected, and our moderator. Thank you very much, Kathryn, the Commission and the European Parliament, and our team. You don't see them, but the people who have supported us, and as well as our construction and sustainability manager, so Anne-Claire Burent, and you can contact her if you have any question as well.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
I hope I made it in 5 minutes. Yes, I did.
Yes, indeed. I think that Renaud, you also wanted to mention the launch of a new brochure.
Yes, thank you. So absolutely. And I do have, in that case, I have to share a slide. So can I share?
Yeah, you should be able to share your screen.
So here you go. Yes, so you should be able to see the slide now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So these are the dates of the next webinars, so the next two in our series on construction and refractories, and next week our webinar on decarbonization. And today, of course, we are very proud of launching our brochure. There you will find some examples that have been mentioned today in all the different ceramic sectors, and the ceramic industry is extremely heterogeneous. So from tableware to clay pipes, sanitary ware, bricks and roof tiles, ceramic tiles, and refractories. A lot of examples, good practices on many different aspects. So you will be able to download it from our website as well, and we will circulate it together with the presentations.
Thank you, Renaud. We've heard a lot today. We've covered a lot of different aspects of the circular economy topic. And I feel hope. I've heard a lot of hope today for real change that could be made through the circular economy package if we can do this in a joint action kind of way, if we can do it together. So thank you to all the panelists. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.